They built legends with blood, gunpowder, and injustice. Hollywood erased them. The official version of history called them outlaws. But behind every name, there's a truth that's stranger, harsher, and more human than any movie ever showed. These are the real stories of the Mexican fugitives who shaped the Old West and that nobody ever told you right. Number 1. Joaquín Murrieta. In 1850s California, the gold rush drew all kinds of people. Mexicans who had lived there before the war were driven off their land, taxed, and persecuted. In the middle of that chaos, the name Joaquín Murrieta emerged, a bandit to some, a hero to others. In 1853, the governor sent a group of rangers to hunt him down. Weeks later, they came back with a head in a jar of alcohol. They said it was Murrieta. They charged $1 to anyone who wanted to see the trophy. The head became a traveling attraction across California, but Murrieta's own sister looked at that face and said it straight. That's not him. Nobody investigated. The jar stayed on display for decades until it disappeared in the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. To this day, nobody knows whose head it was. And Murrieta's story ended up becoming the basis for the creation of Zorro. Number 2, Tiburcio Vásquez. This guy terrorized California for more than 2 decades. From 1850 to only 4, Tiburcio Vásquez robbed stagecoaches, looted entire towns, and escaped the police so many times that the governor put a huge bounty on his head. When he was finally captured, the trial lasted less than 4 hours. On the eve of his hanging in 1875, he dictated a public statement asking young people not to follow the path of crime. To this day, historians still debate whether that was real remorse or just one last calculated performance. The most curious detail in this whole story is that today there is a monument honoring Vásquez in California. Meanwhile, the man who led the manhunt and captured him never received one at all. Number 3, Juan Cortina. Imagine waking up and finding out that an armed group has taken over your town. That is exactly what happened in Brownsville, Texas, in September 1859. Juan Cortina crossed the border with around 70 men, occupied the town, freed prisoners from the local jail, and killed 3 Americans. Then he simply pulled back to the Mexican side, but it did not stop there. He published 2 manifestos explaining why he did it, denouncing the abuses Mexican Americans were suffering in Texas. The U.S. government was furious. It sent army troops after him. The Texas Rangers tried to hunt him down for years. Nobody could catch the guy. And here comes the part that surprises a lot of people. Cortina did not die on the run or in an ambush. He went on to have a political career in Mexico, became an army general, and governed the state of Tamaulipas. He died peacefully in 1894 of natural causes at the age of 70. Number 4, Gregorio Cortez. In June 1901, Sheriff Morris arrived at Cortez's ranch to investigate a horse theft. The problem was that the interpreter translated everything wrong. Cortez said he had not traded a horse, but the translator told the sheriff he was lying. The situation escalated fast. Shots were fired. The sheriff died. Cortez was not a criminal, but now he was a wanted man. What came next became legend. In South Texas, he fled for more than 400 miles, on foot and on horseback, escaping around 300 rangers and armed posses for 10 straight days. When he was captured, he was nearly lynched by a mob. He spent years in prison, was tried several times, and was nearly acquitted. He died in 1916, officially, of pneumonia. But his family never believed that. To this day, many people believe he was poisoned. Number 5, Augustine Chacón. For years, the authorities in Arizona lived through a nightmare caused by one man. Augustine Chacón known as El Peludo because of the thick beard he never cut, ran an operation that nobody could take down. He lived in Mexico, crossed the border, robbed and killed on the American side, and before any sheriff could react, he was already back on Mexican soil, out of reach of the law. He is estimated to have been responsible for the deaths of more than 20 people. The Arizona government got so desperate that Rangers Captain Burton Mossman decided to take matters into his own hands. Mossman disguised himself as a fugitive criminal, recruited an informant from inside Chacon's own gang, and set a trap to lure him back onto the American side. The plan worked. Chacón was captured, tried, and hanged in 1902. When the news spread, they say entire towns across the territory celebrated. Number 6, Pancho Villa. On March 9, 1916, around 500 Mexican guerrilla fighters crossed the border and attacked the town of Columbus, New Mexico. They killed 18 Americans. It was the first foreign invasion on the continental United States since the War of 1812. President Wilson had no choice. He sent General Pershing with 10,000 soldiers after Villa. The expedition lasted 11 months, pushed hundreds of miles into Mexican territory, and failed to capture anyone. Villa knew every mountain, every trail. The Americans came back empty-handed, and the man who humiliated the most powerful army in the hemisphere. He retired to a ranch in northern Mexico. He lived another 7 years in relative peace, until on July 20th, 1923, his car was ambushed in Parral. He was hit by more than 40 bullets. Who ordered the attack was never officially confirmed. These outlaws survived the harshest land on the continent, not because they were fearless, but because they knew skills that most people today have completely forgotten. I actually put together a full guide on those exact lost survival techniques from the Old West. It's called the Lost Cowboy Code, and you can grab it right now through the link in the pinned comment. Number 7, Procopio. In the 1870s, the San Francisco press called this guy Red Dick because of his red hair. His real name was Procopio, and he was a real problem for the California authorities. He was sent to San Quentin twice, the most feared prison in the state, but always for cattle rustling. They were never able to convict him for the murders everyone swore he had committed. The part nobody expected is that some newspapers at the time compared him to Robin Hood. They said Procopio shared part of what he stole with Mexican families hiding out in the California backcountry. That created a legend around his name that lasted for decades. But here is the detail that still intrigues people to this day. At the beginning of the 1880s, Procopio simply disappeared from the records. No documented death, no grave, no explanation. To this day, nobody knows for sure what happened to him. Number 8, Clodoveo Chávez. Everybody knows Tiburcio Vásquez. The California outlaw became a legend, got a monument, and even had a street named after him. But almost nobody has ever heard of Clodoveo Chávez. He was right there alongside Vásquez and everything. In 1873, the two of them led the attack on Tres Pinos, a small town in the California countryside. 3 people died that day. The case made headlines in the newspapers of San Francisco and Sacramento. Vásquez was hunted down, captured, and hanged. But the trial and execution turned him into a martyr for many Mexicans in the region. And Chávez? He fled to Mexico and never showed up in any official record again. No newspaper reported his death. No historian tracked down his fate. History decided who would become a legend and who would be forgotten. Chávez ended up on the wrong side of that choice. Number 9, Juan Soto. California newspapers called him El Terrible, and for good reason. Soto operated in the mountains of Alameda County in the 1860s and was accused of robberies and murders that left entire communities in panic. The detail that makes this story different is who went after him. Sheriff Harry Morse, one of the most respected lawmen on the West Coast, decided he was going to handle it personally. In 1871, Morse rode up into the mountains and found Soto. What happened there was nothing like the movies. It was a fast, brutal, close-range shootout. Soto tried to run, but he was shot in the face and died on the spot. Newspapers at the time described it all with a kind of satisfaction that feels disturbing today. Nobody mourned him publicly. No corrido was ever written about him. Morse would later become even more famous for hunting down another outlaw you will see on this list. Number 10, Chico Cano. While the rest of the country was already driving cars and listening to the radio, a guy named Chico Cano was still terrorizing the Texas-Mexico border. We're talking about the 1920s. The Old West had been over for a long time, but nobody told this guy. He crossed the border like someone crossing the street to buy cigarettes. The Texas Rangers, who had a reputation for never letting anyone get away, tried several times to get their hands on him. They could not. In an ambush in 1913, Rangers died trying to capture him. He kept operating for more than a decade after that. The chilling part is how the story ends. Nobody knows for sure how he died. There was no trial, no famous shootout, no confirmed gravestone. Chico Cano simply disappeared from the records, as if the desert had decided to keep that secret forever. Number 11, Catarino Garza. This guy worked as a journalist in Texas, writing for Mexican-American community newspapers. He seemed like just another local newspaper editor. But in 1891, he organized an armed rebellion against the Mexican government, using American territory as his base of operations. That created a serious diplomatic problem. Washington sent around 1,000 soldiers after him along the Texas border. 1,000 soldiers against a journalist, and they still could not catch the guy. Garza escaped to Central America and kept getting involved in revolutions wherever he went. In 1885, he died in Colombia, fighting in a war that was not even his. The detail that stands out is that one man with a pen and a rifle managed to force two governments to react at the same time. And almost nobody in the United States knows this happened right here on the southern border. Number 12, Aniceto Pizaña. In 1915, a document showed up in South Texas with a proposal that sounded like something out of fiction. An armed uprising to take Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and California and return it all to Mexico. It was called the Plan of San Diego, and it did not stay on paper. Aniceto Pizaña organized armed groups that crossed the border, attacked ranches, blew up railroad tracks, and killed American civilians. The response came down hard. The Texas Rangers and local vigilantes executed hundreds of Mexicans and Mexican Americans without any trial at all. Entire communities were destroyed. Pizaña managed to escape to Mexico and was never captured. The strangest part of all this is that almost nobody in the United States has ever heard of this story. For decades, the Plan of San Diego simply disappeared from school textbooks, as if it had never happened. Number 13, Elfego Baca, New Mexico, 884. A 19-year-old named Elfego Baca decided he had had enough. Texas cowboys had been terrorizing Mexican communities in the Socorro County area, and nobody was doing anything about it. Baca arrested one of them for shooting at a local resident. The problem was that the arrested man's companions did not like that. Around 80 cowboys surrounded the adobe hut where Baca had taken refuge. The shootout lasted 33 straight hours. When the dust settled, the door of the hut had more than 400 bullet marks. Baca walked out of there without a scratch. 4 attackers were killed and 8 were wounded. He was put on trial twice and acquitted both times. After that, he studied law became a lawyer, and lived into his 80s. The door of that hut was kept as evidence in court and became a historical artifact. Number 14, Sostenes L'Archeveque. In 1870s, New Mexico, a young man of Franco-Mexican descent, carried inside him a hatred that started early. His father, Marcelino, was killed by Americans when Sostenes was still a child. It marked the boy in a way nobody around him realized in time. As he grew up, he forgot nothing. On the contrary, he made a promise. He would kill one American for every year his father had lived, and he started carrying it out. Sostenes operated across the New Mexico territory with a pattern that left communities in panic. He did not rob out of need. He killed out of personal conviction. Local authorities could not track him down easily because he knew every trail in that land. When a group of vigilantes finally caught up with him, Sostenes was shot dead. But to this day, nobody knows for sure how many victims he claimed before that. The territory chose to bury that story along with him. Number 15, the Five Joaquins. In 1853, California had a serious problem. Robberies and holdups were happening everywhere, and the name that kept showing up in every report was the same, Joaquin. But it was not just one guy. There were at least 5 Mexican criminals with that name operating at the same time in different regions, sometimes even on the same day. The state government did not bother figuring out which one was which. It hired a group of rangers with one simple order: bring back Joaquin's head. Any Joaquin would do. The rangers went out, killed someone, cut off the man's head, and came back to collect the reward. They put the head in a jar of alcohol and displayed it publicly as a trophy. The state paid without asking questions. To this day, nobody knows for sure who was actually killed, or whether the main outlaw was real, or just a legend the government made up to justify the manhunt. Number 16, Juan Nepomuceno Seguín. This guy fought side by side with the Texans in the revolution against Mexico. He was at the Alamo, but he was sent out as a messenger before the massacre, which saved his life. After the Texan victory, he became a senator in the Republic of Texas and the mayor of San Antonio. It looked like the American dream before the American dream even existed. But as more Anglo-Americans arrived in Texas, Seguín started being seen not as a hero, but as a Mexican. The death threats started. They took his land. The man who risked everything for Texas was pushed out of the very place he helped build. With no other option, he fled to Mexico, where he was arrested and forced to serve in the Mexican army against the U.S. He literally fought on both sides of the same war, not by choice, but because neither side ever truly accepted him. These outlaws survived the harshest land on the continent, not because they were fearless, but because they knew skills that most people today have completely forgotten. I actually put together a full guide on those exact lost survival techniques from the Old West. It's called the Lost Cowboy Code, and you can grab it right now through the link in the pinned comment. Number 17, Red López, 30 people dead, and almost nobody has ever heard of him. Red López operated along the border between northern Mexico and the American Southwest at a time when that region was basically no man's land. He fought in the Mexican Revolution, where he learned how to kill in real combat, not in saloon ambushes. Then he crossed the border and kept doing what he knew best. The American authorities knew who he was, but documented very little. In October 1921, López crossed paths the wrong way. Frank Hamer, the Texas Ranger, who years later would hunt down Bonnie and Clyde, was the one who finished him off in a shootout. The detail that stands out is the silence. A man with 30 confirmed killings should take up entire chapters in history books.
But López gets only a few lines scattered through forgotten reports. When the border swallows someone, it swallows the memory too.
Number 18. Teresa Urrea. She never took up arms. She never led any army. Teresa Urrea did just one thing. She healed poor people. And that was enough to become a national threat. In Mexico in the 1890s, peasants began rising up against the government of Porfirio Diaz, and they shouted her name as a battle cry. Diaz did not think twice. He expelled Teresa from the country in 1892. She was about 19 years old. She crossed the border and ended up in Arizona. But here in the United States, the story did not get any calmer. Mexican revolutionary groups kept using her name as a banner, even without her asking for it. The American government kept an eye on her too. Teresa never sought political power. She died of tuberculosis in 1906, at just 33 years old. Two governments saw her as a threat. All she did was care for the people nobody else wanted to care for. Number 19. Inés Chávez García. During the Mexican Revolution, while generals were fighting over power and ideals, one man was operating in the state of Michoacán with no flag at all. Inés Chávez García answered neither to the federal government nor to the rebels. Both sides saw him as a threat. He raided towns, forced men into his ranks, and executed anyone who resisted. Entire populations fled when they heard he was coming. No army could stop him. No ambush worked. What finally took him down in 1918 was not a bullet or a cannon. It was the Spanish flu, the same pandemic that killed more people than all of World War I. The man no soldier could bring down was brought down by something he could not even see. Sometimes fate has a sense of irony no screenwriter could ever come up with. Number 20. Práxedis Guerrero. This guy wrote poetry in the morning and attacked military barracks at night. Práxedis Guerrero was an anarchist, journalist, and Mexican guerrilla fighter who declared war on the dictator Porfirio Diaz years before the Mexican Revolution officially broke out. He published fiery manifestos in the newspaper, and the next week, he was already crossing the border with weapons in hand to organize armed uprisings. In December 1910, when the revolution finally started for real, Guerrero died in a skirmish in the state of Chihuahua. He was only 28 years old. He never got to see any result of what he fought for. The part that stings is that the movement leaders who came later used his ideas, his writing, and his sacrifice to promote themselves, but almost nobody today knows his name. He is the classic kind of figure movements celebrate after death and ignore while he is alive. Number 21. Pancho Villa, the real end. After years of war, Villa made a deal with the Mexican government in 1920. He was given a ranch in Durango and permission to keep 50 armed men as his personal escort. Mexico's most feared former guerrilla fighter started planting corn and raising cattle. It looked like his story was going to end peacefully. But in July 1923, as he was leaving a notary office in Parral, his car was surrounded by 7 gunmen who fired more than 40 shots. Villa died right there. The government never formally charged anyone, and the investigation simply disappeared. But the story gets even stranger. 5 years later, someone broke into his tomb and stole his head. To this day, nobody knows who did it or where it is. Some say it ended up in the hands of a secret society in the United States. Others say it was destroyed. The truth is that nobody ever proved anything.